All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to AWS Made Easy, episode number 74. I'm Stephen Barr, and we have Rahul Subramaniam, and
Hey
guest
everyone.
today, Carlos Galan. Welcome, Carlos. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Stephen, Raul. Thanks. Very happy to be here. It's a pleasure. I really like these formats. You have this free flow conversation. So very excited.
Oh, we're so glad to have you. And how's everyone's week getting going? How's your weekend?
Carlos, why don't you do the honors of getting started with that?
Sure. Well, I think we had a nice Sunday weather. So I went. I'm based in London. I went to the Greenwich Park. Beautiful place. A lot of green areas. You can see the city from there. If you know the Greenwich Mean Line, that separates Western and Eastern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
So you can hemisphere to the other all the time. No, if you're bored, it's a thing to do there.
Do you have a picture
so that
of you
was
right on the line?
I have a couple of them which I've posted on Instagram. So yeah, it's a tradition for sure. How about yours?
That's awesome. Stephen, why don't you go next?
I get the highlight. So we had a former guest, Keith Hodo. He was doing a fundraiser for a foundation called Extra Life. So that is raising money for families who have kids with medical issues and who are uninsured or underinsured. And so they had the second floor of an Amazon building in Seattle. Kind of Amazon donated the use of that building. It was a bunch of video gamers, and they were all streaming on their various Twitch streams, raising money, and it was really fun. And so when I went over there and did a little interview of the different participants, I'm going to put up Keith's YouTube so you can check out the interviews. Let's see, I'll put this in the links. It is. Yes, that was a really fun event. I think they raised more than 30,000 for needing kids. So
that's fantastic.
It was fun. What about you, Raul? What did you get up to?
The weekend was relatively relaxed. We had India-South Africa cricket match, which was, it was too much of a one-sided game, unexpectedly so. But the Indian team is looking very, very set to win this World Cup. I shouldn't jinx it by saying it too early, but the match was absolutely fantastic to watch. A very high-scoring one on the Indian side, and then South Africa was bowled out for under 100. So, but yet, it was a really fun match to watch. And then since yesterday, it's been an insanely hectic schedule trying to just keep up with all the new announcements that have come in from OpenAI's Developer Day. Some really, really amazing announcements. It's going to take a while to just catch up and try and figure out how to leverage it to do some amazing, cool stuff going forward. So, yeah, been a pretty busy few days.
Oh, absolutely. Well, should we get started in terms of how we all met? So, Carlos, we met you at FinOps X in San Diego. I feel like so long ago. It was only a couple months ago.
It was June.
June.
Wasn't it June?
Yeah, it feels like forever. Exactly.
So much has passed since.
That was a blast, and thanks to our colleague Garrett for getting the introduction squared away. And so at that time, you had you were just preparing to get started at your current role of Just Eat Takeaway. Is that right?
Absolutely. Usually, and actually, one of the requirements to go into the FinOps X is you need to say, "What's your company?" Right? I was confused, like my previous place, but I'm not yet in my next place. So I had to think about it a little bit, and I went to the next one. It's like, okay, let's just think about the future. So I put in justeattakeaway.com. Yeah.
Awesome. So, Carlos, tell us a little bit about your role and what you do at Just Eat Takeaways, and tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I just obviously after FinOps X, I officially joined one of the largest online sort of food marketplaces, and I am sort of the technology manager for the cloud FinOps team. and we very much. So we have obviously one of the things that we started is to create our mission, and our mission is just to help all engineering and platform teams to have a cost-efficient use across all of our cloud platforms. And that's how we sort of defined it. In that, so we have a small team. We're 4 people, including myself, and that is obviously this first 3 months have been a little bit of the intricacies of the company and exactly what are the priorities and how to better leverage, I guess, my previous knowledge from my previous role, and also in order to draft the strategy moving forward, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit more about how you got to this stage in your career and your journey. Like, how did you get started? What were your interests? What subjects did you take up to kind of come into this role eventually?
Yeah, were you coming from a tech background or a business background or a bit of both?
That's a good question. I think I've been on a roller coaster, sort of aspects of life, I think. So I started with engineering. Let's put it away. Very simple. Back in the days, electronics engineering to be precise. Although I never did engineering ever again, interestingly enough. So I did about 5 years of very sort of heavy technical work, right? So it was pretty much around software integrations, that sort of thing. I took a break after those 5 years. I did a two-year MBA program, a little bit into the more business and finance oriented entrepreneurship topics and strategy and whatnot. It was definitely, I would say, a very multifaceted sort of aspect of my career. I did management consulting. I did consumer electronics. And then at some point, I was landing into the SaaS space, which is closer to the cloud. My first time that was actually, getting in touch with. So it was at that point where my company was moving its solution from on-premises to AWS to really understand, or get in touch with what they absolutely. And then obviously, there's a lot of things that happened. How I sort of got closer to FinOps, if that makes sense. That was the first long step to get there.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Hey, Carlos, just one quick technical check over here. Your video seems to be breaking up quite a bit for us. Do you have any other applications or something else open on your desktop which can be shut off to see if we can preserve some bandwidth?
That is a good question. Turn off anything that I think might be interfering just quickly.
Thank you. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at your LinkedIn. Yeah, it's really neat. I could see you've been in the middle of a multi-circled Venn diagram in terms of tech and business, right? We tend to think, historically they've been in totally separate parts of the business. There's the people in suits, and then there's the tech people, and they're don't talk to each other very much except at the Christmas party. And now it's neat to see this convergence where like your career is kind of emblematic of that, right? You've been on very much in both camps.
Absolutely. And I think I've been in places where I feel I am extremely technical compared to my peers. But like, for example, now I feel I'm in the opposite sort of side of the spectrum. It's an engineering company. It's a technology. We say that passion, but tech is our power, right? So I feel definitely more on the less technical side because of how heavy we are now in engineering in our organization, for sure.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. So tell us a little bit about the history of FinOps at Just Eat Takeaway. Like, how large is the organization? How much of the cloud do they use, and are they a single cloud, multi-cloud? How do they think about their cloud setup, and what was the need to set up the FinOps FinOps organization within Just Eat Takeaway?
Absolutely. So one thing where we went is to understand where we come from as well, right? So obviously, number one, as I said before, we are a technology company, so we are builders. Right. We're not afraid to build. We have hot hands, like they say. So we always want to do something. FinOps, one heavy word in FinOps is automation.
Right.
So those things go is a natural thing. Number two, we are a heterogeneous organization. So we have grown out of let's say two sides of the business growing out of acquisition, and at some point they merged. So that as a result of doing things on the engineering side of things. Just an example, one side of the business can be, you can have platforms owning first, allowing engineers to make use of that, as opposed to the other side of the spectrum, which is a bit more giving more freedom to the engineers to actually just spin up anything that they need in order to achieve the business goal, right? So in that sense, we're finding ways to sort of find something uniform, but obviously that has an impact. And I think the third thing is that is crucial. So we serve about very shy under 1 billion customer orders per year.
Oh,
so
wow.
You can imagine that the average revenue, I think on our website, I think it's about maybe 22 or 25 put you on a, sorry?
I just put it up on screen. I was looking at the Just Eat Takeaway website. So 926 million orders in the last 12 months, 87 million consumers, 20 countries, 27.3 billion euro.
That's the global transaction value.
Wow. So that is
phenomenal.
Okay. So this is similar to, in the same space as say Uber Eats or DoorDash, where it's kind of like a two-sided marketplace. You have drivers who are independent contractors, and then restaurants who are selling their food. That's
correct. Restaurants, and also we have let's say a bit more varied type of partners. So we're working a lot now to leverage the same type of delivery, right? So we have that's how we have sort of focusing our growth verticals on that side at the moment. But yeah.
Got it. Carlos, I'm sorry to interrupt for just a second. I want to make sure that the audience is getting the most out of this, because we're going to be entering a very important set of discussions. Your video is still breaking up quite a bit for me. I want to just confirm with Stephen that he's seeing the same. If there's any way we can...
Well, let's just double check. Audience, how is it? Are we still following along okay? I'll just... I'll ask this on LinkedIn too. Yeah, I mean, it's a little choppy. I think we should proceed.
We can just proceed with it. Okay, great. But if there's anything else that you can shut down or kind of dedicate the resources to this video, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've shut down everything now. I think it's like only this screen. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We had a guest once where I think someone else in the house was a gamer. And all the bandwidth got taken up, but that's all right. We've got the local recording for afterwards, so no, this is great. Okay, so two-sided marketplace, and you said there's other vendors who are also selling things. I can imagine there might be like courier services as part of that.
So we have mostly groceries. I think that's that's where we're focusing on. I think other than the traditional sort of restaurant segment that we've had. Yeah,
got it. So tell us a little bit about the technology footprint when it comes to the cloud. Is it single cloud? Is it multi-cloud? What kind of a cloud footprint? I assume that everything is in the cloud. It's a new age business and global at that.
Absolutely.
Or is it all data centers?
No. I think I'm not sure we have anything remaining in the data centers, but I'm almost in 105 that we have. We're pretty much on the cloud now. And I would say our biggest footprint is on AWS. but we also have a significant footprint and growing on GCP because mainly because of their analytics and machine learning offerings. I think we're focusing those on GCP for sure. Yeah.
Got it. So tell us a little bit more about the culture of, FinOps within the larger organization. Is it so? Just to give you a little bit of the backstory, on this show we've had guests who kind of sit across the spectrum of organizations, where at one end you have extremely aligned organizations right from top to bottom, where everyone has the FinOps culture baked into their DNA. And because from the get-go, everything has been really amazing. I think one such example is uh, I had the chance to speak to Adrian Cockcroft about Netflix and the culture at Netflix at one point of time, where when they were just starting with AWS, it was the early days for AWS themselves. Netflix was also kind of growing at the same time, and they had this amazing collaboration where across engineering, across business, across every aspect of the organization, they were very, very aligned. And FinOps kind of got automatically baked into that process. At the other end of the spectrum, you have some amazing folks within the FinOps organization, but at the same time, there isn't alignment across the org, where the FinOps team is just trying to create momentum, trying to build a culture, but they feel isolated where leadership doesn't have the right priorities yet, or they're trying to figure out how to set priorities for everyone so that FinOps becomes part of the culture. So where does Just Eat Takeaway sit on that massive spectrum?
Right. So I think we are, I would say, I don't want to say definitely closer to the more organizations that are more aligned on FinOps. Right. So there's a genuine interest in the engineering organization to have a say on cost, to control cloud spend for sure. However, they're genius organizations, so that we have different ways of doing things, number one. And because of how important reliability is, then there is engineers they tend to have priorities on reliability, on driving that sort of billion amount of orders per year, right? So one of the main things, I guess, that we have focus has been to define a strategy to how to develop the FinOps culture across organization, right? As you can imagine, the FinOps culture, you have three main stakeholders. You need to have executive sponsorship to have a FinOps practice. That one is the most. Then we have the sort of culture within your team. You need to make sure that the FinOps team feels empowered. They feel in a way aligned to a mission forward towards something, as opposed to just execute tasks, right? Which is in the opposite side of the spectrum. Which at that point, I think there was some work that we have definitely done on this part of the culture. I think most of the culture sort of drive has been on the third aspect of it, which is obviously the engineers, who are the ones who understand exactly what they're operating. So, and I think that is has been a process of a combination and reducing the barriers to work with us, if that makes sense.
Got it. No, it absolutely does. And I think that's pretty neat to hear that you guys are that far to this end of the spectrum. A follow-up question: what is the charter that you have for yourselves as the FinOps org?
Right. So one of the things that we have done recently was an exercise to pretty much on that second part of the culture, which is the sort of the FinOps team and the FinOps offering. So It was an exercise to understand what is it that we actually do, right? So how can we actually, because we need to understand this in order to communicate to the value proposition that we bring to the table. And we start with this mission that I said before around, making sure that our have an cost-efficient use of the cloud platforms, but also it was building a set of sort of capability that actually help us to provide a full explanation of what we do, right? So I have a caveat here to say that one of the best books, non-fiction books, FinOps books from the FinOps Foundation. I think they've done a fantastic work at being very structured in the way how they explain FinOps. That was my first sort of approach into what FinOps is. And the second edition is even better.
True.
Because they say it's a thicker, but since I'm a Kindle user, I have no idea. But
you can feel the extra bits in there.
How to do FinOps. Yes, exactly.
I'll put that on the screen. Here we go. It's the Cloud FinOps.
Correct.
And let's see. I'll put the link also in the description. This is definitely very it's got a very authoritative guide, and O'Reilly's a great publisher. I've been using O'Reilly books since my Pearl 5 manual, the Camel book. So yeah, they're great.
And JR and Micah both done an amazing job with the second edition. There've been so many editions ramped. Even though FinOps really is just about 3 years old. The first book was about 3 years old. The number of editions that have had to come into the second edition is just absolutely mind-blowing. And it just kind of goes back to the fact that the FinOps org and the FinOps practice has been growing at such a staggering rate over the last 3 years or so, that it's heartening to see. So just back to the charter of how do you define what FinOps is to the Just Eat organization? How do you define it? How do you define the mandates that you have for your organization?
Right. So I come also from having worked so as part of the sort of a cloud financial management practice, which is the same thing as FinOps.
Right.
So the reason why I bring up the Cloud FinOps book is because I've always struggled to explain the sort of informed framework or the See, Save, Plan, Run from AWS. I always get lost in the last bit. If I'm going to communicate this, we need to be very confident, makes sense, and has some sort of some coherent order, or more that at least that I feel fluent. So we came up, as I say, we started with a mission, did a brainstorming session around all the different capabilities, everything that we can do, everything that we know that FinOps can do around cost rate-based, usage-based, all of that. So let's put it as boxes. And then the most important bit is how can we actually group these boxes so it makes sense? And we came up with 4 pillars. Explain. I think one is the first one is culture. Is how to instill habits in across the organization. The second one is data, which is we want to make sure that we and reduce the barriers for them to actually help us to achieve the main mission. About optimization, which is the actual work that needs to be done, spent on the cloud, whether that is usage-based or rate-based, as you know. And then the last one, we call it controls. It's a little bit like mitigating any sort of anomalies, right? That you want to make sure that, obviously, pillars 2 and 3, they're more focused after the fact, whereas number 4 is trying to know. You can obviously do this with things like forecasting and budgeting, so you can do alerts based on that. And obviously, now you have new tools out there, like my friends from Infogood, actually, what they do. Not doing any ads, but it's just I wanted to mention them. Right. So what is the expected spend before you actually spin something out? So things like that, right? So I think with these 4, we managed to find a balance and that actually makes sense for the engineers, because sometimes these pillars can be maybe explained more for Finners because of what we do. But for engineers, it needs to be like you're explaining it to a 10-year-old kid. So they don't have time. So you need to make sure that you just bring them on board And
Well, it's amazing in these interdisciplinary endeavors how much just establishing a common frame of reference or a common vocabulary is so important, and that's why we're glad that we can have that FinOps manual of really saying, okay, if we're not bringing in just I don't know, business, MBA, financial terms, we're not bringing in just engineering terms, but really coming to a common ground. I was reading about the history of, I think it was the history of Tesla, where they had a similar, they had engineering folks and business, and one of the first things is, okay, let's establish a common vocabulary and a common framework for how to discuss things, so that we can then move on to the other four pillars. How do we need the data, you need to optimize, and then have controls. No, I really like that. The pillars as you've outlined them. That's a really good way of thinking about them, and it's such a logical progression. And I also like how the first one, right, is the people issue, right? 2, 3, and 4 seem like tech issues, but the first one, you got to get the people aligned first.
Actually, all of them at some level are people issues as well. So let's just dive into that. Invariably, when it comes to optimization or control, particularly, a lot of organizations feel resistance from the engineering teams. Resistance in the sense that, one, granting access to the data, granting access to controls, or limiting their controls or the freedom that they have on the system by means of control is usually received with a lot of pushback. So how does the FinOps team and the engineering team work together to ensure that it doesn't become an exercise in stonewalling the other team, but instead is more collaborative to try and get to this common goal? Because at the end of the day, the FinOps team is trying to create efficiencies, while the engineering team is kind of going to lose some level of freedom and bring in some level of discipline. So it's a little bit of a give and take on both sides to make this stuff work. So how do you guys approach it? How does it work within your org?
That's a good question, and I think approach when it comes to this. Obviously, we started with some education, right, around what FinOps says, why it's important. Obviously, we start with that. We start with the pillars and all the explanation. So that I think we did that stage. After that, we have sort of we have taken let's say data around cost optimization, and we have set like very intimate, let's call it 2-hour sessions with engineers. Bring a laptop. We're gonna share with you what we think can be optimized, and let's just work on that. Our first step into working with engineers. Then because we have the next stage obviously had to involve some degree of automation. So at this point, what we did was we have a tool that we use for cloud visibility that also provides you your classic recommendations on right sizing and whatnot. So we take those via API, right? Additional, let's sort of policies that we use an open source rules engine called Cloud. Familiar with it? This sort of rules engine obviously runs through the infrastructure and gives whenever one of these policies have been breached by any of the other resources. So we take those two results and we put them into a open source tool as well that is widely used in the engineering world, which is called Backstage. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Developed by Spotify, right? And so we use Backstage for everything. And one of our main missions is to make sure to reduce the noise for engineers, sure that they are empowered, that they have the data, but we don't want them to have to access too many different things. So that is one step. So to reduce that friction, obviously, we take this sort of all these recommendations by API, we put them there at the team level, so teams now actually can first of all contextualize recommendations, which are based only on the resources that they operate. Number two, we also provide them an estimate of what is the saving that you can achieve. So as well, to have a sense of where to prioritize the effort, because we understand that they need to implement something. And obviously, a very important one that we added recently is the opportunity to button. Just like when you get your alarms in the morning, you touch your phone so it doesn't bother you anymore. So the same thing here. Sometimes for a good reason, because you know that you need this resource for whatever disaster recovery or high availability. You can snooze it for 6 months, and then it's a way for us to let's work closer, but at the same time we're going to give you a degree of autonomy, right? So now you're going to have more tools to do what we would like you to do. Makes sense.
Got it.
I like that idea of a snooze button. So you're saying we're aware that this is an anomaly. It's okay if it's an understood anomaly, right? There's a migration in place, or I don't know. There's a I don't know, it's understood, but it's still monitored and tracked by the system. I like that idea. Right,
so
I know people... Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a follow-up question on that, which is, it looks like you've figured out a way to work with the engineering team to at least give them the tools that makes them feel like they are in control and they have more flexibility around executing things on their own without being constantly, having someone look over their shoulders or being, hampered by the tools. So looks like you found a way around that. My second question to you is going to be, how do you get in the engineering team to prioritize or to allocate time and resources for FinOps related activities? Because invariably the engineering team reports into business. The businesses have priorities like ship the feature on time. I see a lot of parallels between FinOps work and technical debt work. There's the same story you hear with technical debt, where no one disagrees that doing all these things is a good thing. There's literally no, like, you ask anyone in engineering, is it good to remove technical debt? Everyone will agree, yes, absolutely. It should be a priority. It should be on the agenda. You should spend time fixing all of these, technical debt issues. Similarly, you have the same conversations about FinOps. There's no one who says, no, it's a great idea to leave $1 million on the table and not optimize it. No one is going to say that. But invariably, it boils down to priorities. It boils down to, whether someone has made it someone's job to actually go and optimize and be able to spend time on it. How does it work within your organization? How do you make that work? How do you make it a priority? And before you answer that question, I'm going to let the audience over here know we have a whole bunch of folks on LinkedIn and YouTube and a bunch of other channels. Feel free to ask your questions over here. This is a great opportunity to learn about how a different organization is doing FinOps, how they're running FinOps, how they think about cost efficiency, and how they make the dynamic roles of engineering and business and FinOps teams work together. So ask your questions. Carlos is here to answer them for you. So go ahead, Carlos. Sorry for that small segue, but I wanted to make sure the audience gets a chance to ask questions as well.
Absolutely, not a problem. And I think that's where the first pillar, at least we're hoping, it comes to the rescue. So on one hand, obviously we started providing the education for engineers around why FinOps is important. It's a very simple freedom, but at the same time, clear responsibility. So let's work together to make sure that we can be both free and responsible. I think that's pretty much the message that we transmitted. Then obviously we put the data on their hands. And now is where we are going into the next phase, I guess, on the first pillar. On one hand, we are prepared how we're going to measure success, right? Obviously, one of the main questions is like, why should I invest time in this? I mean, who really cares about this, right? So they understand the why, but they're not going to be super clear around how we're going to measure this. And in that sense, there's two stages, right? Then let's just measure the amount of savings of any optimization that we have achieved, and we can track that and we can celebrate that, right? Very simple. The next, obviously, as you know, in the cloud, it's very hard to explain to senior leadership what happened to the 10,000 dollars of saving that you think you did, because all I keep seeing is the and obviously this is where we, again, using a 10-year-old kid language, introduce a concept of cloud fitness, right? Economics, right? So it's just a wrapper around that. And the idea is that we can try to track this at the team level. Teams can actually see that efficiency as your sort of chosen cloud fitness KPI comes down. And obviously we have explained how that this sort of downtrend translates into bottom line impact, right? And that is, engineers love data. So this is a way to actually put robust data to explain really how things in an automated way. That makes sense, right? And I think that's the next step that we're going for. And one thing that we are a little bit experimenting with is to, we have a monthly report where we obviously look back to around what are the things that we're doing, what are the sort of anything that we are achieving as a team. And also want to make sure that we communicate any challenges that we see, and we're trying to use the data that we have from that sort of backstage plugin to inform, well, these are all seen, and these are the ones that have been on hold for a while. These are the ones that have been achieved somehow, to find some degree of escalation if you really need to. It's an experiment. We don't know where this is heading, and I think it's for health sanity purposes, it's good to show this, right? So I think that's what if you can see that it's pretty heavy on the culture pillar for this one.
Got it.
Well, I like how you emphasize also, one of the things that I guess is in the psychology of work, right? Being able to see the results of your actions, right? And so if people are working and toiling away to do this, and then they don't know, okay, it's all gets washed away in this big bucket at the end of the year of savings, right? That's really hard. But like you said, there's the monthly report. You can highlight what teams save money, and there's visibility, and there's a feedback loop, right? So it's not just helping this giant entity in some way that's really hard to tease out, but you actually get this feedback on a much faster time horizon of, okay, here's the tangible results of my activity. But I always like to put it, I know it's kind of silly, but I always like to put it in terms of cars. So I think, okay, wow, we just saved a sports car's worth of savings by this. This is like not lighting a Tesla on fire, right? I always like to, it's for me, it's that tangible thing, because right, saying we resized a bunch of instances, I have a lot more trouble picturing that, but thinking of it in some other way, I like thinking about it that way.
Okay, so I have a whole bunch of other questions that I want to follow this up with, but why don't we take a 1-minute break? And I think we had a comment over here about the video still getting a little bit choppy. So we'll see if we can find a solution to that problem. But let's take a quick 1-minute break, and we'll be right back with more questions.
Some tools just find AWS cost savings and make you do all the work. Visualizing cost opportunities is great, but that's not enough. CloudFix, on the other hand, actually delivers those savings for you. And you don't need to worry, because CloudFix is AWS recommended and easy to use. It's the only tool that fixes cost-saving opportunities and not just finds. It's the easiest way to save money on AWS. It's all 100% automatic and risk-free. And the best part of all, it works non-stop. Stop overspending on AWS and click on the button to start saving now.
All right. Well, let's see.
Okay.
I was thinking about the visibility and data, and my mind was wandering back to where we were at about ReInvent. One thing I'm going to do for our live streams at ReInvent, I need to do a little bit of integration with this. I'm going to have our live step count for Rahul and I. So every day, it's just, okay, here's our ReInvent cumulative step count. We'll see who can get to. I wonder if we'll break 50,000 by the end of the week.
I feel very confident we'll be well over 50,000 by the end of the week. My legs usually tell me that, pretty much by day 2. Anyway, coming back to the main topic. So I think I still haven't got the answer, Carlos, to my original question about. I love the insights that you just provided about the mechanics of how you basically show and celebrate the savings at regular intervals, so that it's top of mind for people. However, for engineering, which usually reports into business, right? Businesses basically set priorities to say, roll out these 5 features. It's critical to get the next $1 billion in revenue for us. So those features are incredibly important. Work on that. That's a priority. When that side of the business is putting that kind of pressure to roll out features, to ship new product, to ship new capabilities, which also in turn has big revenue impact. At that point, how do you pitch the idea of FinOps and these optimizations and these efficiencies and, like you said, cloud fitness taking a priority? How do you make that a priority in this wave of business requests for new features?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. So as you know, so given the information that I provided before around our close to $1 billion per year, it is very easy to lose, I guess, revenue on quickly if reliability is not a priority, right? And I think that is one of the main challenges that we as a FinOps organization face, as you said, because engineers have roles, right, which is like the main priorities that the team have. A lot of that is on reliability. A lot of that is on growing the business, and a lot of that actually, because of our heterogeneous sort of makeup, is about consuming of backend platforms and finding common ways to do things, right? So a number of things that the engineering teams are doing is around compute to EKS, for example, right? Let's just find a way for us to all use Kubernetes in a ordered way. And we're also migrating sort of all of our analytics, Google BigQuery, you know, so that's also part of let's just try to make sure that we leverage that, and so that's obviously a challenge. What we have done again is on those 2 first pillars, I guess, data, culture. We're taking a very humble approach here, so we don't want to put any, let's sort of automated controls that if that's where you're going around, for example, on our 4th pillar, right, the controls one, we have a lot of ideas there, but it's the one that we're taking with a very grain of salt at the moment, because we want to make sure that we are aligned with the engineering team when it comes to that. That 4th pillar was to even reduce further the barriers for engineers to actually have to do things, right? So you can just go there and so at the beginning we said we are going to do 80% of the work for you. All we want for you is help us with tagging, help us with optimization, and be updated. Make sure that you are aligned. I think those are the few questions. But obviously, when we dive into that 4th pillar, I guess that we're going to be able to say, no, we can do 85% work, right? So which is would be a way to live more in peace with those business priorities.
Got it.
That's one way to do it. Yeah.
So just one last iteration on this particular question. So it seems like engineering is very well aligned with the FinOps team and kind of in lockstep. You guys operate in lockstep. But how do you get the business to say it's okay for engineering to spend time on this stuff?
So we do have, I think, as I said before, there's a genuine interest coming from senior leadership. We're part of the CTO organization, and it is so you can see it on our all hands, right? So there is a message around let's make sure that we are looking into cost. So the work cost is becoming more and more, especially I guess since last year. Because of the whole situation, we have seen that more and more helps. And I think that is the only way that I've seen, I guess, directly how to get some attention from engineers as well. No?
Got it.
Well, it sounds like a really good organization where there isn't, obviously there'll always be just, competing incentives. But that sounds really nice. There's time and space for it. Because I think Rahul and I probably both had experience where they're very disaligned, right? And so the engineer, on one side said, this is going to blow up later if you don't address this. And the other side is, pedal to the metal. Inevitably it does happen, right? But then it's really nice to be part of a team where they're taking this disciplined and measured approach.
So, Carlos, I'm going to follow that up with something practical, something pragmatic for everyone. What are the top 3 recommendations that you see at Just Eats, where you tell your engineering teams, here are 3 things that you should absolutely do in terms of real savings insights? Like, what are the top 3 things that come up for you guys? Is it things like S3 buckets, not using intelligent tiering? Is it things like, GP2 volumes not showing up? GP2 volume being used instead of GP3s? Or like, what are the top 3 things where you tell your teams to make sure that all your bases are covered there?
So I think there's one that I have in my head, which is like absolutely the number one.
Great.
And this one does precursor to optimization, but it's not directly related to optimization, right? Which is the proper tagging of resources. So we are an organization that rely heavily on tagging of the sort of heterogeneous makeup of organization. We have had not only different ways to approach technology, but also different ways of tagging. So at the moment, actually, as we speak, we're working on a piece to make sure that we are doing that on a more uniform, unique way, sort of JET way. That is the number one sort of, if I had to say what keeps me up at night from a FinOps, the tagging, for sure. Yeah.
Do you have tagging policies in place where you can't launch a resource if you can't tag it? Or it automatically gets tagged when it's launched?
We have to some degree that for sure. I think we're getting a bit more proactive on this, definitely, doing things like the service control policy level. I think that's something that we're going to introduce soon.
Okay.
For example, we are sort of getting ahead of ourselves because we understand it's super important, right? So there's a number of priorities that we want can only be done once the cost allocation is 100%, and that can only happen if you have a very, I want to say accurate, but a high degree of tagging on resources, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think you nailed that one. Tagging is such a fundamental or foundational activity that you have to do. Like, I wouldn't even know where to begin in terms of a FinOps organization if you did not have tags. You couldn't do any show back, you couldn't do any charge back, you couldn't even figure out where money is being spent. And if you even found remedies to fix it, just because resources are not tagged, you wouldn't know whether who owns it, how long, how critical is it, how long do they need to run it, when is a window of opportunity for you to optimize it. So tagging is absolutely critical to do anything at all with any resource in the cloud.
Well, I love how you described it a couple of months ago. We were talking about tagging, and you said, imagine if you got your credit card bill and it was just one number. Didn't say what vendors, how much. It was just one number. And what do you say? Well, how do you adjust to that?
I think if it was my card, I'd be shocked and I'd be running to the bank to say, shut down my card right away, because I don't know. I don't know why you just charged me such an insane amount on my card. So, so that would be my story. But I think when it comes to the cloud, it's everyone's story. If you did not have tags to say who launched what and why, and how to allocate it all back, you wouldn't be able to make any progress with efficiency. In fact, it will be downward spiral to a very, very inefficient org. So, okay, that's the first. What's the second that you would pick?
The second, that is, I know that I personally know that we can improve, but it's very hard to give a recommendation on because it's heavily reliant on architecture decisions. And this is, I would say, room for improving elasticity. Makes sense. To make sure that because one thing is to measure. So we're using unit economics, for example.
Right.
We have been using it for 2 years now at the business unit business level. The business driver that we use is obviously customer orders. It's called the cost per 1,000 orders. I think that is
Right.
the main we use. One thing is to look at that at a monthly level, but the other thing is to look at that at an hourly level, right? If you look at an hourly level, when you have those customer spikes, obviously from lunchtime all the way into late evening, that's where you can actually see how an architecture is, right? And I think that is somewhere that I think our migration in JS is going to definitely help, for sure.
Got it. Yeah, so actually, you're absolutely right. Sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
I was distilling it down into one sentence. It would be, I guess, having the granular visibility, or how would we distill this part of the conversation down into a sentence?
I would say you mean as a
recommendation. Yeah.
Yeah. So be elastic like the cloud. Sure, if that's a bit high level, but at least again, going back to the 10-year-old language.
I think if you're not creating or building elastic applications in the cloud, then you're missing the whole point of the cloud. And therefore, there are no efficiencies to be had if you're not elastic in nature. If your workloads cannot, or if your resources cannot scale up or down along with the workloads, then you're basically operating the whole setup like an internal data center. And you're not going to see the efficiencies that come from actually being in the cloud. So I think it's a great piece of advice. Make sure that your applications are as elastic as possible. And that basically means that your systems have to be as stateless as possible. And that's when you have incredible amounts of efficiencies to gather. If you're doing transactional-based processing, then switching from EC2 instances to something like Lambda could be orders of magnitude cheaper. A Lambda costs $1 for 1 million invocations at the base level, right? So let's say you had 1 million API calls. You could handle 1 million API calls for about $1. And that's radically different from having EC2 machines on standby, waiting to take on the workload of 1 million API calls. They're fundamentally very different paradigms, but the cost economics are very, very different on those two. Another example is being able to leverage spot instances. If you had the ability to be stateless and elastic in that sense that if a machine goes down, you can always bring another one back up, and it's stateless in that sense, then you can actually start leveraging a lot of the spot instances that could be 90% cheaper than the on-demand instances. So you have all the flexibility and incredible price efficiency if you can do it. So I think I love your suggestion of make your applications as elastic and stateless as possible, because that's when you're leveraging the real power of the cloud, and that's where all the efficiency gains are to be had.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to push you for a third one, Carlos.
Oof, I'm sweating now. Exactly. Right. So the third one, I think this is a big one. It's a new one for the organization, by the way, and it has to do with BigQuery, right? So it's obviously, I know you guys do mostly focus on AWS, but this is very unique way of billing method. It has your bill by compute and by storage, and then compute is based on units that GCP calls. So it is really interesting to understand how to optimize this, right? So you can either optimize the number of queries your data warehouses. You can optimize the way the data warehouses are partitioned. You can also, also optimize the way that you store the storage. It's very similar to intelligent tiering, but it's like if your data is, this is very hard. This is a third recommendation, but very hard. If you ask me to put this in a sentence, it's going to be almost impossible. But yeah, so the storage, you can also decide whether you want to store the actual amount or store a compressed version of it if your data has a lot of money. So all these things it's just finding the right way, right? And also the things about BigQuery or any analytics or data warehouse tool is that your end users are not necessarily engineers.
Yeah.
So they can be part of the business, they can be finance, they can be business, just querying data to have. So how can you ask these stakeholders to actually do any optimization at all? That is a good question, right?
Yeah. Let me see if I can summarize this. So your recommendation is to, and I think I'm going to extend it out to pretty much any service in the cloud, to really understand the best practices associated with operating a service efficiently. For the case of BigQuery, it becomes how your data is accessed, how much data is accessed, and how much compute is applied to query that data. And there are heuristics and best practices around partitioning the data, tiering the data, storing it in a certain way, or pre-caching it so that the queries are as efficient as possible. With other services, you have other best practices, some of which we've discussed in the previous episodes as well. But I think understanding the service and its nitty-gritty nuances and operating at efficiency is, I think, the takeaway from this. Because no matter what service it is, if you don't understand how it works, if you don't understand its best practices, I think you're just going to be pouring money down the drain. Because with a lot of these cloud solutions, there are bad ways to do the same thing, and the bad way could cost you orders of magnitude more money than when you operate it efficiently.
I tried to distill it in that banner down there of understand the best practices and the pricing model for the cloud resources you use.
I think that's even more succinct than I did.
Well, I had the benefit of listening. Well, one of the I got that lesson and thinking about it while you were talking, so it made it easier. Well, one of the ones that comes to mind is CloudTrail, right? Where if you say, okay, first copy of the management event is free. So you could say, okay, I want to have a CloudTrail trails that are, I don't know, built based on stories, where there's a lot of overlap between the stories, right? Because this story uses S3 and that story uses S3. But then you'd be saving many copies of the same management events because you're not understanding the structure, right? So I think understanding the pricing model and, like I said, Rahul, the best practices. Yeah, so just read how it works. Take the time to read the documentation, and look at how people are using it in the wild, right? Talk to other people.
I think in most cases it's the latter. It is the documentation to understand the pricing and the structure of how the service gets used. But a lot of the learnings on these come the hard way. You try something out, and then you burn your fingers with a massive bill at some point of time. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love this forum, where we get to share, experiences about what didn't work, and share that with a broader audience so that everyone learns from those experiences. So I think last question for you, Carlos, and I know we're coming up on time. What's one bad experience that you've had, and I don't know if you would be able to share this, that someone else can learn from? Like things that didn't work out as planned, or things that just went out of control because there was some check not in place. Is there one learning that someone else could take away from your experiences, from your organization, or just something that you have learned from someone else?
That is a good question. I think I had a story around. It was when I heard about this, it was new to me. I never understood, but I think it happens pretty often. Is when you have recurring lambdas that call somehow themselves again, so they never end. And if you know, so lambdas, you said, is very good serverless application for very punctual. If you compare 1 hour of EC2, very simple EC2, with 1 hour of Lambda continuously, very different experience, right? So very different use cases. So if you have a recurring Lambda, definitely not good to have.
Got it.
Doesn't it warn you about that now? Didn't they?
Yeah, so that's absolutely right. So this used to be a huge problem of Lambdas being called over and over again for whatever reason. There are multiple different reasons where Lambda would just get called recursively, and you would end up in these loops that would run infinitely, never stop. And that would cause you massive bloats in bills. Or sometimes you'd get massive spread in Lambda calls where the same thing was being called 5,000 times. And you wouldn't just have one Lambda running again and again. You would have 5,000 Lambdas running all the time and cause massive bloats. So the good thing is the AWS announced a feature which now actually doesn't just warn you, but it actually will stop. It'll detect and stop these recursive loops in Lambda functions. And I think we did cover it on this particular show back in July, as soon as it was announced. So it's a big deal. It actually solves a big problem that a lot of folks have had in the past. And the good thing is that AWS will do this now automatically for you. You don't have to change anything. You don't have to do anything differently. And it will automatically detect and stop these recursions.
Well, I can imagine certain TAMs calling up, putting a request in saying, hey, my customer blew this up again. It turns out Lambdas scale really well.
So Lambda team, you did a brilliant job. We now have a $100,000 bill from this customer for a Lambda function that just went out of control.
This is this is like the cloud equivalent of putting your microphone by a speaker and hearing that squealing noise, right?
Basically, the feedback is insane when it comes to these runaway functions. That's why I say when it comes to the cloud, the bad way could be orders of magnitude more expensive. Like the blast radius of a bad practice could be very, very large compared to an on-premise setup where things are still contained by how much resources you actually bought and put in your data center. However, the flexibility is so totally worth it, and the pace of innovation is so totally worth being in the cloud and leveraging that. So I'd say learn, back to Carlos's second point. Or was it the third? Yeah.
Well, I'll put up the pillars. Here we go.
Yeah, not the pillars, but the third tip.
The recommendations.
The recommendations.
Exactly. It was be elastic like the cloud.
Correct. So you want to be actually, the third one is, while you're being elastic, understand the best practices about how you should deploy and run. Put all the checks in place so that your services don't go out of control.
And this is almost the exception that proves the rule, right? That AWS won't stop you from doing something inefficient. Right. This is, this and a few other cases, right? Like checking in your keys to a public GitHub repository, right? That they've learned that that's something that's worth actually stopping you from doing that. But there's very few things that they will actually stop you from doing, even though they can be expensive.
Correct. Like leaving your SageMaker instances open or running when no one is using them. That's another amazing way to kind of literally pour your money down the drain.
Or forgetting about a Kendra index. Even the developer copy is $800.
Wow.
All right.
Exactly. Okay. I think with that, we are at time. So thank you so much, Carlos, for coming on this show. I think this is a really, really fun experience. Hopefully we'll have you again to talk about how Just Eat Takeaway has progressed in their FinOps journey and to tell us the new version of where you guys stand.
And then hopefully we'll
thank you for the invite.
Thank you for coming. And hopefully we'll see each other at FinOps X number 3.
Yeah, for sure. I think looking forward to that. Definitely. I'll see. I'm sure we're gonna see each other very soon. But yeah, this is very, very fun. Again, as I said, I love these formats, conversational formats, and we'll see if we come with the Jet 3.0 FinOps version soon, and can tell you how the story goes.
That would be fantastic to learn about. Thank you so much once again, Carlos. And thank you to the audience for being here with us. Please feel free to ask your question and leave us your comments and feedback. We have ReInvent coming up literally in 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. The days are shrinking very, very rapidly. But we're really looking forward to it. If you're going to be in Vegas for ReInvent, please come by the CloudFix booth. We're going to be there all day, all week during ReInvent. Or catch Stephen and me. We are going to be all over the place. We're going to be doing live streams from ReInvent as well, talking about what's happening, try and give you all the insights. And then we have an amazing lineup of AWS guests who are going to help us wrap up the show. Correct, Stephen?
Yes, we do.
Share some more details.
We have
on
Rick
that.
Ox, we have Lorenzo Winfrey, and we have some more coming. I'm going to announce soon. Just working on the final bits of the schedule. But yeah, Rick was going to be there. We're going to talk about the latest in Compute Optimizer. Lorenzo Winfrey, former guest of the show, on flexible computing.
Yep. So we're looking forward to all of that. So drop us your comments, drop us your notes, drop us your feedback. We would love to hear from you. And till then, we'll see you next week.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks.
See you.
Some tools just find AWS cost savings and make you do all the work. Visualizing cost opportunities is great, but that's not enough. CloudFix, on the other hand, actually delivers those savings for you. And you don't need to worry because CloudFix fixers are AWS recommended and easy to use. It's the only tool that fixes cost savings opportunities and doesn't just find them. It's the easiest way to save money on AWS. It's all 100% automatic and risk-free. And the best part is that it works non-stop. See for yourself. Click on the button to get a free demonstration of CloudFix and stop overspending.